G'day, I'm Warwick Schiller, and I just wanted to talk about how this whole horsemanship stuff, or this whole get along with horses, it's a bit of a journey, and you know, it's kind of like climbing a big hill or whatever. You can only imagine as far up the hill as you can see, and you think that's the top of the hill, but when you get to the top of that hill, there is another hill further up. And I know right now, you know, in the last couple of years, things have changed a great deal for me, and probably the big thing that's changed is Wayne Dyer, who's an American philosopher and author. Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I've really changed the way I've looked at things in the last couple of years, and it's made a huge difference. And I think I was ready to see it differently. I know years ago I wasn't ready to see it, but I just wanted to talk about something I used to do. I used to do quite a bit of desensitizing with horses, okay? And so this is Ringer, he's an off-the-track thoroughbred. And let's say you were trying to get a horse used to something like this bag on this whip here that's tied on here somehow, but to make sure it doesn't come off. If you're trying to get a horse used to this thing, what I would do in the past is I might start quite a bit away from him, but I would start putting a little bit of energy into this bag, and if the horse moved around, was concerned by it and moved around, I would keep the same amount of energy. I wouldn't get worse and punish them, but I wouldn't take it away. And when the horse got better, so the horse slowed down, stopped being so reactive, started thinking, I would take the bag away. And eventually you could get to where you do this and the horse doesn't move. Now, it's not what you call flooding. Flooding would be preventing the horse from moving and continuing with the bag until no matter what they did, they couldn't control the bag, so they just ignored it. So flooding is basically teaching horses how to shut down. It was not flooding. It was what the sciencey people might call excessive approximation, you know. I would put some pressure on it, the horse would move around, and when he thought about getting better, like maybe slow down, I'd take it away. So right there I'm telling him he has control of the bag. There are things you can do to make the bag go away. Flooding is not that. Flooding is nothing will make the bag go away, then they tend to just block it out. And then eventually you get to where you can do, you can get closer and closer and closer, and the horse doesn't really respond to it. And years ago I had when we lived in Australia, I had a fellow come and visit me, and he spent a lot of time with a horseman in Australia named Phil Rohde. Now, Phil Rohde happens to be my oldest brother's father-in-law. I've known Phil since I was a kid. And Phil's a very, very handy horseman. And this fellow had spent quite a bit of time with Phil, and he came down and spent a week with me. And he was doing something similar with a horse I had there. It was with a tarpaulin, not just a flag. But what he would do was he would bring the tarpaulin out, and when he approached the horse with it, this horse is not going to move. Maybe I should grab a tarpaulin so I can kind of give you an idea what I'm talking about here. Now, I've not done any tarpaulin work with this horse, but what he was doing, and he probably shouldn't have this bigger tarp, but what he was doing was he'd bring the tarp closer to the horse, and when the horse got bothered by it, he would take the tarpaulin away and wait. And I'm not going to tell you what he actually did. I'm going to just say what I saw. He'd take the tarpaulin away, okay? And then he would approach the horse with the tarpaulin, and the horse would start to get bothered, and he would take the tarpaulin away. I think the horse he was working on actually moved its feet, okay? And then he would bring the tarpaulin over, and the horse would get bothered, and then he'd take the tarpaulin away. I'll just keep going here and see what happens. And then you bring it. That's exactly what happened, okay? So right then, I approached this horse with a tarpaulin, and he raised his head up and turned his head like he wanted to leave. And so let's go back to this fellow in Australia. When he did it and the horse left, he took the tarpaulin away. And in my way of thinking, if you know, with the way I was desensitizing things, if you bring something near a horse and he runs away from it and you take it away, you're teaching him to run away. That was the way I looked at things at the time. That was the lens I saw that through. What I now know is what happened right then. It's less about desensitizing a horse and more about communicating to the horse that you see their distress. So what happened with this horse a second ago was I brought the tarpaulin over. I got closer. he raised his head up, head and neck up, turned his head a bit, and his eyes turned away from me. He said, "Oh my God, that bothers me." And what I said was, "I saw the fact that bothers you, and I'm going to take it away because I understand it bothers you." And I waited, and he kind of stood there like that, and I waited until he went, "I feel better now." When he said, "I feel better now," I said, "Okay, I'm going to do it again." And the second time he did exactly the same thing. He goes, "Oh, that thing bothers me. It kind of scares me." And I said, "I see your concern," and I took it away. I came back a third time, exactly the same thing happened. He showed me his concern, I took it away. The fourth time I came over, what did he do? He turned towards it, his ears were pricked. He's like, "Well, that's interesting." Okay, he wasn't bothered by it at all. And by my old way of thinking, I would have been teaching this horse to stick his head up and look away when I put the thing over there. My new way of thinking is I was telling him, I noticed the very instant that he got concerned, and notice he didn't move his feet. If I had kept, like when he turned his head and raised his head up, if I had kept approaching, he would have moved his feet. But what I did was I noticed that moment where he said, "Hey, that bothers me." And that's that one moment I've got to say, "Hey, I saw that," and take it away. Now, if I did it differently, brought it over to him, he raised his head up and started running around, and I followed him around for 30 seconds. And while he was running around for 30 seconds, I kept at the same distance from him, then I took it away. That would be teaching him to run away from it, because I would not be telling him anything. I wouldn't be telling him that I noticed his distress, because he still was running around. You know, he said, "I'm distressed," and he took off running around, and he was running around, he would have been running around exactly the same when I took it away, which means I didn't notice the moment of his distress. I hope I'm making sense here. But what he did right then was exactly basically what happened was the guy approached him with the tarp. The horse said, "It concerns me," so he took it away. Did that a few times, and then the horse was good with it. And at the time, he didn't explain it to me, he just said, "This is what he's been shown." But at the time, it looked to me like he was doing exactly the opposite of what you should do to get a horse good with a tarpaulin, and it still worked. And at the time I was like, that must be some sort of mumbo jumbo magic. But looking at it now, I just changed the way I looked at things. And instead of, these days I'm more about the connection with horses and the relationship I am with the training part itself, you know, the obedience part. Someone I know came up with a saying a little while ago, which I totally agree with, and it said, these days I'm less concerned with what I can get my horse to do and more concerned with how they feel about it. And I think that approach I did just then is me communicating to the horse that I understand how they feel about it. And I think that understanding builds connection and trust that you just cannot train into a horse. I think it's a, you know, it's a connection thing. But anyway, that worked out perfectly for the demonstration. I wasn't sure if it was. But anyway, so just think about that. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Hope that helps. We'll see you guys next time.